If you are even a casual K-pop fan, you are certainly familiar with the phenomenon that is itzy. Immediately upon debut, itzy was titled a leader of 4th gen and was at the forefront of the industry in the early years of the 4th generation of K-pop. However, from starting at the top, itzy have seen themselves tumble into the middle ranks of relevant 4th gen girl groups, another victim of rapid consumerism and high competition in a low attention span industry that is constantly looking for something new. I'm amongst those who would say that this decrease in popularity coincides with, and is likely because of, a gradual decrease in musical and artistic quality of their releases. In this video, I divided up itzy's 9 current eras into 3 chapters, grouped based on musical similarities I found between them. From this, I created an outline of the trends in itzy's musical identity and explore why these changes in their musical identity resulted in a decrease in their popularity. Keep in mind that everything I say is just my personal opinion and analysis, so please, disagree with me in the comments and let's discuss. With that out of the way, let's take a look at their debut era. It would not be hyperbole to say that itzy entered the K-pop scene with a meteoric rise to the top with their debut single of Dalla Dalla and the B-side Wanted. Dalla Dalla went mega viral, instantly becoming an almost universally praised track amongst K-pop fans and the Korean general public alike, making itzy one of the leaders of the newly emerging 4th gen. And itzy managed to maintain this momentum throughout their first 3 releases, their debut trilogy so to speak. Musically, I think Dalla Dalla is very strong because it introduces a lot of musical ideas which are continued in Icy and Wannabe, and define a unique core sound for itzy from the get-go. These elements are bratty chanted vocal sections with some melodic choruses, maximalist detailed instrumentals using lots of funky samples and percussions, like cowbells, lots of little synths and blips, and the ticking of a clock in Dalla Dalla, a prominent repeated EDM bass line, and frequent change-ups in the instrumental, especially during the second verse and the bridge, which introduces new melodic material and adds more layers of complexity to the instrumental in Dalla Dalla, which is where we get Yeji's iconic part. On top of establishing a unique sonic concept for itzy, Dalla Dalla's success can be attributed to the fact that it is catchy and danceable while maintaining a really detailed production. In K-pop, being catchy and exciting to a wide audience is arguably the most important aspect of the success of a release. Because Dalla Dalla manages to be catchy and exciting for a wide audience while also making interesting artistic choices in its choreography and production, almost every K-pop fan could find something to enjoy in it. Dalla Dalla achieves this with its fun and uplifting chorus, melody, and its amazing choreography, which set a new standard for dancing in the 4th generation girl groups for others to meet. All of the creative ideas I discussed can be found throughout itzy's first trilogy of releases and their B-sides, and characterize their initial debut sound. Altogether, itzy's debut was a resounding success. With their first EP and the title track Icy, itzy was able to continue with the momentum they established in Dalla Dalla. While Icy did not reach the same heights of success as Dalla Dalla, it was still well received. Icy follows up on the musical identity laid out in the previous tracks, featuring a prominent repeated bass line, crisp, quirky percussion with unique samples and sounds like spring squeaks, little ascending blips, honks, and chopped up vocal samples. It also has a vocal hook and significant change-ups in the second verse and bridge, which feature elements of dubstep and new melodic material. All of this is common with Dalla Dalla and establishes a core musical identity for itzy just within their first 2 title tracks. The main criticism of Icy was that the chorus instrumental was kind of hodgepodge and sounded like an amalgamation of random sounds without clear organization, but I would personally disagree with this assessment. However, this criticism was more than made up for by the immense praise itzy received for Icy's choreography, which was super difficult and unique compared to typical idol dances of the time. The EP of Icy also had 2 more unique tracks, Cherry and It's Summer. Cherry is a hyperpop track, which is one of itzy's most popular B-sides. Its prominent farty bass with a super edgy and synthetic texture is sultry, bratty, and full of personality. While not as strong as Cherry, It's Summer is certainly an adequate third track and is cohesive with the musical identity of the mini, with a prominent bass line, quirky percussion, bratty chanted sections, and glimpses of glitch pop and dubstep. Both of these B-sides are fun to listen to and elaborate on the sounds and ideas itzy have presented thus far. Despite the heights itzy experienced with Dalla Dalla and itzy, they somehow managed to top it with Wannabe. After Dalla Dalla, Wannabe is probably itzy's most viral song, with its iconic shoulder dance move and a large dose of signature itzy sass. Like Icy, Wannabe follows up on all the key musical choices set up by Dalla Dalla, which I have laid out before. Wannabe features a prominent repeated dance beat with kooky samples like cowbells and sliding synths and little ringing bell, with fun and interesting variations in the second verse. In Wannabe, the dance break in the bridge is super fun to listen to because it combines the acoustic guitar sounds of the pre-chorus with the synthetic dance beat of the rest of the song, which is just ear candy. Compared to Dalla Dalla and itzy, Wannabe is less EDM and more pop in its pre-chorus and chorus, featuring a simple, digestible instrumental which mostly just supports the vocals in the chorus sections. From a purely musical standpoint, I think it's a little bit of a step down from their previous releases, and it foreshadows a lot of the musical changes that are to come, just in a less drastic extent. Wannabe Era is also an important milestone in itzy's career because it was their first full-length album. In the album, most of the songs are EDM at their core, exploring house beats and reggaeton, matching with itzy's high-energy, maximalist character. While the concept of making itzy's first album EDM-centric was a good idea and fits with itzy's identity, that's about the only positive thing about the album because, in my opinion, each track has really poor execution. Many of these tracks have honestly atrocious sounding choruses, which are jarring and under changes relative to the rest of the song. I think JYP's producers lack the nuance and eye for detail to really fill out the production and instrumental to really execute these types of songs well. The two non-EDM tracks on the Wannabe album are Nobody Likes You and 24 Hours. Nobody Like You is instantly recognizable as a pop track, contrasting against all the EDM tracks that came before it. To me, this track is pretty weak, as both its instrumental and melody are pretty unexceptional and kind of boring. Nobody Like You's Disney Channel intro teen pop type sound is the first of its kind in itzy's discography and foreshadows an unfortunate shift in their musical direction which is yet to happen. The other unique track on the album is 24 Hours, a hyperpop track which follows in the footsteps of Cherry, although it is certainly less popular and well regarded. This song is full of juxtapositions, the farty, nasty bass against the sparse, MIDI piano chords, and the dissonant chorus hook against the super major top line in the verses. It's cheeky, bold, and full of personality, and the only B-side I saved from this album. At this point, a trend kind of emerges from itzy's discography. They haven't really released all that many songs. IC's mini album was basically 3 new tracks and a whole bunch of remixes of their first single, which I remember itzy being rightfully clowned for at the time. Looking at Wannabe, which was marketed as a full-length album, the tracklist is only 7 songs long, and it's more of a longish mini-album than a full-length album. JYP likely chose to promote their releases this way to add some fluff and bump Icy up to an EP and Wannabe to a full album to maximize on physical sales, but otherwise I'm not sure if there's another impact on their discography. And I don't think the low number of tracks have hurt their popularity at all. Looking at how other successful 4th Gen girl groups were managed, like IVE and New Jeans, they were all initially promoted with very few tracks. For girl groups, having a few solid songs which go viral amongst the general public and K-pop fans has proven successful as an initial model for breaking into the scene. The consequence of this is that because itzy have released very few B-sides, all of the discussions I've seen about the group have centered around their title tracks. I've observed that this continues to be true for all of itzy's future releases from debut until the present day, which means that the reception of a release is entirely dependent on what people think about the title track. Itzy are a title track group, and as I was re-listening to their entire discography for this video, I had almost nothing to talk about for most of the albums and B-sides. As I look at their later releases, I think this is one of the main reasons for itzy's fall from grace. As their title tracks became weaker and less well received amongst the wider K-pop fandom, everyone either lost their interest or only voiced criticisms. Nonetheless, itzy's debut trilogy was super strong and established a clear and unique sonic identity for the group, featuring crisp production where all the layers and elements of the instrumental are discernible and interesting. With this, after Dalla Dalla, Icy, and Wannabe, itzy placed themselves right at the top of the ultra-saturated, hyper-competitive K-pop industry, and it seemed that they had nowhere to go but up. Following the cohesive opening trilogy of Dalla Dalla, Icy, and Wannabe comes a few eras of experimentation and deviance from itzy's debut image in Not Shy, Mafia in the Morning, and Loco. Compared to the other two sections in this video, the title tracks of the quote-unquote sequel trilogy are the most diverse and are a time when itzy is exploring the creative direction they would grow into and make a lot of changes between comebacks. And, spoiler alert, they took more steps backwards than forwards. Itzy's fourth release opens with its lead single, Not Shy. Not Shy continues with the quirky, fun, and upbeat concept and character of itzy's previous singles, but with a notable change. Everything about the song seems somewhat simpler. Not Shy is the first itzy single to include a prominent repeated sample which is included throughout large sections of the song, instead of a production which is constantly changing and evolving. I personally strongly dislike the saxophone sample used here. It's super abrasive and is not fun to listen to, but the vocal quips in the chorus make up for this somewhat and make the track listenable. There are notably fewer fun change-ups in the instrumental and melody compared to their previous titles, and the only contrasting section is in the bridge. The section where this musical simplicity is best seen is in the pre-chorus, which is conspicuously less sonically interesting than anything else in the track. The pre-chorus sits in a cliché synth soundscape which doesn't build off the offbeat ideas presented elsewhere in the song, and in my opinion, was included to make the song more accessible or palatable to the audience. Overall, I would consider Not Shy to be a slight step down from their previous works because it has less interesting musical choices, but it ultimately follows in the aesthetic and conceptual character of its predecessors, and had a generally solid reception by its fans, which makes sense to me given its acceptable quality. However, the musical simplicity set up in Not Shy will continue to inform itzy's development as artists in the next few comebacks. And now we arrive at the infamous Mafia in the Morning, a song which K-pop fans love to hate. I'll say it right off the bat. Mafia is straight up cringe, not in a cute and campy Red Velvet kind of way, but in a what the fuck is going on cravity kind of way. The concept is just difficult to watch. The idea of a mafia concept is already ludicrous enough, and combined with the super cringy lyrics and delivery, it's just unlistenable. Like seriously, what is the hurry up, baby catch me if you can, haha part? Like, I don't know. Ultimately, the concept is trying way too hard and is so contrived and over the top and in your face that you can't ignore any of its glaring weaknesses. This era showed that itzy's personality is charming in brighter or teen pop concepts, but overbearing and cringy in darker or more ostensibly serious ones. But you've probably heard all of that commentary before a bazillion different times in different words. The conceptual and lyrical nightmare that is Mafia in the Morning cannot be denied, but these are backed up by a musical mess. Following in the footsteps of Not Shy, Mafia has a simplified instrumental which highlights a single sample. The dissonant, arpeggiated sample they use here is pretty annoying, somehow worse to me than the saxophone of Not Shy. There is a clear lack of substance and variation compared to their earlier title tracks. Dalla Dalla's instrumental is constantly evolving in natural yet novel ways, but Mafia's is pretty much identical except for in the pre-chorus, but not in a good way because the pre-chorus is also very weak. The song only really has one musical idea, which is that questionable sample riff. Mafia was, in my opinion, rightly met with ridicule by both itzy's fandom and the larger K-pop fandom. I have recently seen a lot of commentary which attributed the negative reception of the song to the abrupt change in itzy's visual concept, leading to the whole circular discussion of K-pop stans hate when groups continue with one concept and also hate when they switch concepts. But but I really don't think that line of conversation applies here. From a musical perspective, Mafia is a clear downgrade from especially Dalla Dalla and Icy. And even if itzy originally started with a dark or edgy visual concept and style all along, this would be a bad release for that trajectory. Mafia marks the point where itzy were no longer discussed as much amongst the general K-pop fandom. As I brought up in the previous section, the discourse and excitement surrounding itzy have always been about their title tracks. The general K-pop fandom was interested in the group because their lead singles made for catchy and fun performances. Having such an atrocious title track like Mafia abruptly stops all of their momentum and alienates casual listeners from the group. I don't think itzy has ever really recovered from this dent in their reputation. Even though their physical sales have shown healthy growth through this era, their popularity amongst the wider K-pop fandom certainly suffered. To end this middle portion of itzy's eras, we have Loco. Loco did an immediate 180 from the darker and edgier style of Mafia, returning to itzy's teen pop aesthetic. Sonically, Loco solidifies itzy's new style of simpler instrumentals, with relatively few elements used throughout, especially given it's a K-pop song which are usually very maximalist, and the instrumental usually works in the background of the vocals. This is also the first itzy title track where the overall mixing and production stand out in a bad way. All of the elements of the instrumental and vocals are super prominent and bold, and the sound is a bit too in your face. The worst part is the vocal production and delivery, and the vocals, especially in the chorus, are difficult to listen to without cringing. While I think itzy's vocal production has gotten a bit weaker over time, I think it sounds odd partially because the instrumental being simpler means the vocals really have to stand for themselves as the center of attention to the listener, and itzy simply don't have the vocals to fulfill that. Coming off of the disappointment of Mafia in the Morning, itzy used Loco to equilibrate back to their well-loved, quirky teen pop concept, but it has a few notable differences from their debut sound. Through the eras of Not Shy, Mafia, and Loco, itzy's instrumentals have become simpler and less layered, and lack the quirky maximalist energy and production, and generally feels a little bit more clunky. Overall, through these eras, itzy seemed like they were trying to reinvent themselves in new directions, but ultimately ended up behind where they originally started. To be brutally honest, if I had to describe itzy's latest 3 eras in 3 words, they would be gimmicky, derivative, and boring. Sneakers, Cheshire, and Cake basically take all the worst musical trends which started off in Mafia and Loco and expand on them until even remnants of itzy's debut songs are nowhere to be found. These are certainly my least favorite tracks from itzy, even including Mafia in the Morning. Kicking off this chapter, we have Sneakers, a simple teen pop song which can basically be boiled down to simple vocal lines over a bass line. It gets super boring by around the 1-minute mark, by which the audience has already heard everything the song has to offer. It embodies the quote-unquote TikTokification of K-pop, where the top line becomes a super simple and repetitive chant-singy line in the chorus to have a postable little clip for TikTok. There isn't really any bite or intensity to the song, and beyond the dance challenges looking cool, there isn't really any reason the general K-pop fandom should care about this song or discuss it. Cheshire and its super contentious pre-release Boys Like You hammered this point home. Following Wannabe and Mafia in the Morning, Boys Like You is probably itzy's most talked about song, but for all the wrong reasons. Out of all of itzy's tracks, it is probably amongst the most uninspired. The generic instrumental and uninspiring melodies are stagnant and feel entirely uncreative. The proverbial straw on the camel's back is the super cringy English lyrics, which somehow managed to be delivered in an even more cringy way. The vocal direction of the song really failed the girls. Cheshire is certainly a stronger track than its pre-release of Boys Like You, but it still has a lot of the weaknesses of Sneakers. My biggest problem with Cheshire is the mixing and production, where both the instrumental and vocals sound super abrasive. The super high register of the chorus combined with the poor mixing makes the chorus pretty difficult to listen to, and parts of the song have really weird melodies that feel like a first draft of the top line instead of the finished product. Just like the chorus of Sneakers, I think this part was valued because it made a cute TikTok clip, but otherwise the melodies fall completely flat. One positive of Cheshire I have to mention is that I think the instrumental is certainly stronger than a lot of their most recent releases and has a few interesting elements to it, although it's nowhere near comparison to their earliest title tracks. Cake immediately squashed whatever hopes I had gained from Cheshire by being basically Sneakers 2.0 on steroids. The instrumental is quite boring and uninteresting, with basically one musical idea going on for long stretches of time. Listening to Cake and Sneakers back to back, I realized you can basically switch the instrumentals of the two without really making too much of a difference, which really shows how little creative effort was put into them. And the most annoying part of this track is certainly the annoying saxophone-ish sample which opens the song. Again, just like Sneakers, Cake is the epitome of pandering to TikTok, with the awful cake, 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 cake hook and the la 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 part which follows. Neither of these sections make any sense as an actual melody and are just for posting the dance challenge on TikTok. And again, the vocal production and mixing of the song are brash and not super pleasant to listen to. If I listened to any of these later itzy title tracks before listening to a well-mixed group like EXO or Shinee, it's night and day, and it feels like a pressure has been lifted from my ears. The difference is so big. Ultimately, Sneakers, Boys Like You, and Cake are so simple to the point of not even really musically qualifying as K-pop title tracks in my eyes. These tracks maintain the aesthetic of itzy's teen pop concept without any of the musical bite. JYP's creative team basically consolidated itzy's interesting and quirky sound into a gimmicky teen crush concept without any real musical substance to back that up. To be clear, I'm not saying that maximalist or busier instrumentals are inherently better, which is certainly not the case. However, looking at itzy, their newer sound is so overly simplistic, corporate, and generic that it removes the quirky charm that they debut with and claim to continue with. Just because itzy have continued with the same teen pop concept visually, in terms of the lyrics, outfits, and music videos, doesn't mean that they have continued with the musical production quality to make that concept exciting. Itzy's latest releases feel hollow and shallow in a way that Dalla Dalla, Icy, and Wannabe never did. Ultimately, I do not think itzy have been overhated or the victims of a hate train, as some midsies would now suggest. Songs like Sneakers might conceptually be similar to, say, Dalla Dalla, but if you listen to those two songs back to back, it is obvious which one has more creative intent. Even though itzy's sales have steadily grown from debut to the point where they have recently been million sellers, which is just amazing, it is clear that they have been beaten at the top by their fortune competitors for both the Korean general public and the K-pop fandom. They've certainly been the victims of K-pop's notoriously short attention span and constant need for the next best thing. Once Mafia in the Morning released a horrible reception, unless itzy made a complete recovery, I believe they were pretty much doomed to no longer be at the very top of the 4th-gen girl group scene. JYP's creative team continued to fumble the bag creatively and musically, cementing itzy's position in the middle ranks of 4th generation. At this point, I don't see myself ever standing itzy or getting back into the group the same way I was when they debuted, and I think many others have had the same experience. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my comprehensive analysis on the musical development and ultimately downfall of itzy. I had a lot of fun listening to their music and drawing trends across their releases. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. I don't make these videos to say what I think is objectively right, I just provide my subjective opinions and experiences. And honestly, in the process of re-listening to itzy's entire discography, I was able to find a few really amazing B-side tracks I missed on my previous listen and added them to my playlist, so certainly a win for me. Let me know what you think about itzy's discography, and with that, hide out.